in the laws of kosher creatures. So there are three classifications. There's kosher animals, there's kosher fowl, and there's kosher fish. What do we note? When it comes to kosher animals, the Torah requires shchita, that the animal be slaughtered, and moreover, both the trachea and the esophagus, the windpipe and the food pipe, need to be severed, at least the majority of both of them, for the shchita to be kosher. When it comes to the bird, the kosher fowl, it's enough to slaughter only one of these. And the fish requires no shchita at all. So we're going to explain this now in the light of Chassidus that reveals the soul of it's the soul of Torah, of every law, of every story. And revealing the soul of it means revealing the spiritual dimension, and most importantly, the personal dimension. That every story, every halach in Torah, even though in practical terms, many are not applicable, most are not. Most of the laws in Torah are not applicable nowadays, certainly, because you don't have a Beis Hamikdash, but Baruchni, spiritually, they all are. And that's what Chassidus reveals in all of Torah. So, what did we say last week? We said that a person, a yid, is comprised of not two souls, but three. Number one is the conscious animating soul, which we call the nefesh habahamit, the animal soul. This is the human conscious, the human condition in its conscious, most overt state. We are a sophisticated animal, and no psychologist would argue. Sophisticated, I say that in quotations, because our sophistication can get us into a lot of trouble that animals do not. Because our needs are complicated, but it all comes down to needs, physical needs and emotional needs, and it's all me, and life centers around me, and it's gratification, and it's now. I want it now. That's the animal soul. Then that's the animal we described. Then there's the bird. What's the bird within the human soul? This is the mind. The mind is free, like a bird soars in the heavens, but then it comes back to roost, can't remain forever in the sky. So too, human intelligence is capable of contemplating that which is above me. Purpose, truth. We can consider ourselves. Animals cannot consider themselves, think about themselves. The dolphins are apparently the most intelligent of all creatures. Well, there are dogs that are highly intelligent, of course, monkeys. As intelligent as they are, and they can communicate, and there's even speech to some degree, and they're playful, and there are emotion, but they can't consider themselves. How am I faring? How am I doing? Is this good or bad? There's no morality to it. They're simply driven by instinct, and there's simpler instincts and higher forms of life. But the human being has a mind like a bird that soars. We can detach, we can consider ourselves. Why am I here? What's my purpose? And it's the mind that's the arena of our choice. That's where all our choice takes place. So that is the bird which soars. But, pardon? So the bird which flies, that's in the words of Tanya, that's the nefesh hasichli, the intelligent soul. And then there's the fish. So we said that the fish exists in water. We spoke at length about the significance of water, its transparency. It unites. Water by nature is a unified, it's not particles joined together. It's one entity, because the world of holiness, the fish represents the neshama, the godly soul. The world of holiness, there's unity, there's transparency. Holiness means you see through everything and you see the divine core. Like fish live in the sea and can't exist. When it's taken out of the water, the neshama exists only, that's its world. Its world is submerged in the divine. We spoke about Shabbos. By Shabbos we eat fish dafke. So, in conclusion, the animal represents the animal soul, the bird represents the intellectual soul, and the fish represents the godly soul. Animal needs a complete shchita. The bird needs a partial shchita. Kosher fish require no shchita at all. What is shchita? So let's examine what shechita means. The Torah says, it's an interesting thing actually when it comes to shechita. The Torah doesn't say how to shecht. All the Torah says is before you partake of a kosher animal, it's got to be kosher, it has to be shechted, v'shochat. And just in parenthesis now. So where do we know that, how to shecht? It's nowhere in Torah. It's in the oral law. The Eibishter told Moishe Rabbeinu orally, which he then communicated to the people, and eventually it's recorded in the Mishnah and the Talmud. This, by the way, is one of several proofs that when Hashem, we need these proofs, that Hashem gave the Torah, he gave not only the written law, but the oral law. I don't have to tell you that there are those that say, the written law, that's from Hashem. All the explanations and so on, it's made up by the sages. There's only a written law. There's never any oral divine communication. One of the proofs is shechita, because this is what the Torah says. Hashem tells Moishe, you shall shech the animal as I've commanded you. These are the words. As I've commanded you. No instructions anywhere. So obviously he commanded him orally, not dictated. There are also other indications. But shechita is one of them, which is significant. That of all the laws in the Torah, what points to the role of the oral law, or the existence of the oral law, which we call, because it's passed down initially orally, is shechita. Anyway, maybe we'll revisit that. It's significant. So what's shechita? So the Gemara says like this: Ein v'shochat ela Gemara in Chulin ela u'moshach. Shechita means an act of drawing. The blade, which as you all know must be perfectly sharp without even the slightest nick, has to be drawn, severing the esophagus and the trachea, as opposed to pressing the knife down, as opposed to piercing, as opposed to a scissor motion. All of that would render the animal treif, not kosher, actually a nevela. It has to be a fluid motion from point A to point B. Umoshach. Says Hasidus, this is very significant. We find a parallel in another area of Jewish law. What's that? The laws of acquisition, another area completely. When you acquire something, according to Jewish law, payment of money does not make you the owner. You put down money, you're still not the owner until you acquire it. You have to make a kinyan. There has to be a formal act of acquisition. Now, depending on what it is that you are purchasing, there's different kinds of kinyonim. One of them is called meshicha. You draw the object to you. In other ways, lifting it, whatever the object happens to be, depending on the nature of the object. So, to draw meshicha is the very same word that's used in the laws of acquisition. Once you have drawn, actually when it comes to an animal, objects you can lift. Animal you can't lift. How do you acquire the animal if you're buying an animal? You draw it, you take it, you pull it close to you. Other objects, the Gemara discusses all kinds of large land. How do you acquire land? You can't lift it or draw it. To formally acquire land, so I don't have to put down money. You have to do an act, till the land, do something on the physical land, demonstrating your ownership. At any rate, but one of the ways is to draw. When it comes to an animal, literally, that's you take it. You take it, pull it by the halter, you draw it towards you, that's the acquisition. What happens? It then goes from the seller to the buyer. What are we saying? We're saying that the act of shechita is an acquisition. What's the acquisition here? So friends, let's put it to you this way. Often people would ask me, nowadays the sensitivity, the sensibilities of the current, how does Torah allow to eat meat, kill an animal? How does Torah allow this? We should be vegetarians. That's surely the more noble and elevated and refined way to live. Why take a life from an animal? So the response to that question is, you're right. And moreover, you have no right to take the life even of the plant or the fruit or the vegetable? Why is your life more valuable than the life of the plant? Actually, there are certain plants, flowers, apparently, that respond emotionally. In an emotionally toxic environment, they wilt. And when there is love and so on, the flowers flourish. They have feelings, not as sophisticated as yours, but they have feelings. It's life. What I'm saying, my friends, is we have no right to anything, not even to a plant or a fruit or a vegetable or a stalk of grain. You're saying, Rabbi, so we'll die. No. So, in fact, this is a terrible thing, but a young person once said to me, very deeply depressed, suffering the low self-esteem and depression, and said to me, my life is just this, I'm just a burden. I'm a burden to my parents, to my friends. I pollute the planet. What value do I have? And if I died, actually, they'll sit shit, they'll get over it. They'll get over it, there'll be a loss, but life will go on. And moreover, if I died, at least I'll contribute some nutrients to the world. My body will decay and give. That way I'll really contribute. Now I'm just taxing. It's torture for me and others, and I consume and pollute. So what's the answer to that? The answer is, you're also right. However, Hashem gave us Torah mitzvahs, and the purpose of which is to elevate the world. We have no right to the plant or the animal or anything unless we, by engaging it, elevate it. What does that mean? Hashem created the world, as we said before, animals and certainly the inanimate world, the plant world. They have no free choice. They can't do mitzvahs. They just created. Hashem endowed us with the power to choose. We can elevate his world, or we can degrade it, or we could degrade it. How do we elevate it? If we use the world in the service of Hashem, we connect the world to Hashem. The object, the animal, the plant, my car, my house. There's a spark of God in everything. And when I use it for a mitzvah, I redeem that spark and I elevate it and I grant purpose and meaning to this object, plant life, animal life, or inanimate. And not only then am I granted permission, I have to. That's my whole mission here. In other words, as explained in Chassidus, the world is divided into 4 stratas. These the inanimate, to make it a simple illustration. Inanimate, plant life, animal, and human life. It's a pyramid. So what happens? The inanimate world, soil, water, nourishes the grass. Now, science has just discovered this in the last, century, but this is an age-old truth. Energy is never destroyed. As you eat something, it doesn't disappear. Nothing disappears. It's only transferred. It changes state. So the energy that's in the soil now becomes absorbed and elevated to the grass. The animal then eats the grass. So now the soil, the inanimate, the plant life becomes part of the animal. No virtue to this. But if a Yid comes along, it's coming along, a Jew comes along Friday night or Yom Tov at his table, or even during the week, and the animal is slaughtered kosher, and it's kosher, and he makes a bracha before, and he makes a bracha afterwards, and he eats in a dignified manner, in a respectful manner, and most importantly, with the energy that he gets, he does mitzvahs, he's elevated the soil and the water and the grass and the animal. He's all elevated. As he connects to Hashem, he brings all of this energy with him and connects to Hashem. He redeems the world. He elevates it. That's the whole purpose. So you all know that the word mitzvah means commandment. The mitzvah means connection, because when we do the mitzvah, we are connecting ourselves and the world, the object, wherever we are, the place that we go, we're connecting it, meaning we're revealing the divine spark there. We're granting meaning to this place, eternally so, by the mitzvah that we do. And therefore, not only we have a right, we're obligated to engage the world. But if chas v'shalom, we don't, we're engaging the world selfishly, in an unholy way, in a non-kosher way. We're actually degrading it. We're degrading the animal, we're degrading the plant, because plants don't do bad. Animals aren't bad, but if we eat it in such a way that we don't do a good thing, we do a selfish thing, we drag down the energy to the world of unholiness. I remember, just one quick second, I'm going to pick that up. This was when I came to America the first time, in 1975. So the first Farbrengen I heard it from the Rebbe, one of the things the Rebbe said then was talking about the creation of man, and he was quoting how the angels in heaven trembled when Hashem created man, because they understood angels are also animals. They're spiritual, beautiful animals, but they're animals. That's why we call them chayes. They're not free choice. They trembled because they knew that God gave the whole world to our hands. We can elevate it, we can destroy it. And I mean this physically, obviously, but most importantly, spiritually. So this is why we are allowed to eat the animal, and anything for that matter, even the plant, if we are elevating it. That's what shechita means. By the way, important to add over here. What if I didn't? There's a lifetime of engagement in the world, and it was not godly and not mitzvahs, and it wasn't kosher, or if it was kosher, but it was indulgent. What now? That's just teshuvah. The moment that Yid does teshuvah, as we were speaking in the previous, if you heard the tail end of the previous shir, we elevate and transform all of the previous engagements in our life, because everything we did, we still remain connected to spiritually. We think we've moved on. There's no moving on. We carry the connection, the baggage. And the moment I turn to Hashem, sincerely, I bring everything in my past with me, and it's all elevated. The incredible gift of teshuvah. No greater gift. A lifetime of abuse, misuse, squandered opportunities, or worse than that, degrading moments. I polluted the world spiritually. That moment, that can all be elevated through sincere teshuvah. It can happen in a moment. What are we waiting for? So, all back to shechita. Just a little story, by the way. Many stories illustrate the point. There was once a woman that came to the Alter Rebbe, found of Chabad. It was a lung of an animal. It was a question and it's kosher. The lungs are a big problem, because when the animal eats, it snorts and it brings in all kinds of stuff, and it pierces the lungs and could render the animal treif. And the Alter Rebbe was the butcher. The Alter Rebbe is laboring over to examine it. And he says to him, Rebbe, it's okay, you know what? You're spending so much time on it. I'll sell it to the non-kosher butcher. So we'll go to the non-kosher butcher. Well, it's okay, let it go. Says the Alter Rebbe to him, to the butcher, if you would know how the soul of the animal is pleading with me to find me, make it kosher so that I end up on a Shabbos table. You'd understand why I'm laboring to find that it's kosher, that it can be directly elevated. And many stories like this. Tzaddikim see this. So back to shechita, what did the Gemara say? Ein v'shachat ela u'moshach. What's shechita? You have to draw it. The knife has to be drawn from point A to point B, and the Gemara, the Talmud, is invoking that word acquisition. You've got to go from one ownership to the other. Shechita means we've got to elevate the animal. We've got to elevate ourselves. We've got to channel our drives, not from selfish to selfless, not for my physical need, but for what Hashem wants, which is really what I want, my neshama wants. So having said this, friends, we understand the laws of shechita as they apply to the three categories of animal, of creature. The animal soul within me, which is the most basic and sensual and really left unchecked, destructive. He needs a really strong shechita. The animal in me needs a complete shechita. the windpipe, my breath, my food. It's symbolic of all of my needs and experiences and pleasures. I've got to work really hard to shech that, to channel it, to direct it in the service of Hashem. It's hard work because we're selfish and I want it for me. And I want to do what I want to do on a physical level. So there's constant work, shchita, to draw it from the animal state to the meaningful state, to the elevated state. And that's a lot of work. Hence the shchita is a full-blown shchita. Comes to the bird is the mind. The mind to begin with is not this sensual creature like my animal soul is. The mind is, as we said before, can consider, and the human emesis, what sets us apart from animals is our mind. And that ought to be the human, forget anything moral, just the human world ought to be the world of ideas, the world of truth, the world of understanding. That's really the human unique property. I speak of science, anything. But because the mind is naturally objective, it wants to see the truth. So the shchita there is only half, as it were. What's required of the animal, only one of the trachea or the esophagus has to be shechted, because it has to be an act of shchita. Because, like we said, the bird doesn't remain in the sky. It comes back to roost. The mind is not just the objective seeker of truth. The head is stuck onto the body. The mind can very easily be harnessed to the animal soul, which means what I want is power and glory and physical pleasure. How am I going to get that? Oh, I'm going to be a professor, a politician, and I'm going to invest a lot of intelligence and scheming and be a big businessman and outsmart everybody. So I'm using my mind, but it's not for holiness. So there's got to be a shchita there too. Can't trust the mind alone. With my mind, I'll figure out the truth. The mind can also be like the bird, doesn't remain in the sky, soaring forever. It comes back, has to come down to earth. It's got to rest. The mind is still tethered to the body, to the selfish drives. So therefore, got to be careful there too. There's got to be an act of shchita, of surrender, but not as severe as the emotions, the animal soul, driven by just passion and emotion. Be clear. The fish, which represents the godly soul, no shchita at all. The godly soul doesn't need to be shech. The godly soul is in the world of the oceanic spiritual world. We don't have to elevate it. It is elevated. It wants Hashem. All we got to do is embrace it and allow the soul within expression. But no act of shchita, drawing from one domain to the other, is required because it is in the domain of holiness. That's its world. That's the depth of me. So we have the animal soul, whose domain is selfish. The other extreme, the godly soul, whose domain is godly. And in between, the human mind could go either way. And therefore, the act of shchita, meaning to say, what's my mind for? What am I want to use it for in the end? To seek the truth, learn Torah, do what Hashem wants, and do it objectively, and remove that taint of selfishness that can corrupt the mind as well. Hence, we need a kind of shchita. The bottom line of all of this is that we are learning from all of this is that life is work. We're all shachtim. We said before, I think last week, that the shochet is the most respected person in the community, more than the rabbi. The rabbi also should be. But the shochet has to be very God-fearing for a good number of reasons. First of all, the shochet is under pressure to shecht a lot of animals. The more he shechts, the more the butcher can sell. But, so that's pressure. But to do a proper shchita, you got to take your time. So he's got to resist the pressure. He's paid for every animal, yeah, or whatever it is. So, and secondly, the laws are so refined. The life has to be so, it's so easy to miss it. But now, most importantly, why is the shochet the most respected person? Because he represents the whole purpose of our life. It's all to elevate the world, elevate the animal soul, to direct intelligence, to allow our neshama expression. He symbolizes that what we're here for. He's really the symbol of the community, the shochet. So we're all engaged in this, friends, whether we actually physically meet or not. You know, it's interesting, I'll conclude in a minute. Our sages say I'm not telling you to do this, but that a person who is not refined should not eat meat, except on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Why? Because to elevate the steak, this requires a refinement. If we're eating it purely sensual, the juices are flowing, and we're not elevating, even if it's kosher. But the Rebbe says, no, eat it. Kosher, make a bracha, and eat it and enjoy it. For our generation, just because enough that it's kosher, you're making a bracha, and we trust you, you're doing good also, you're elevating the animal. So I'm not saying anybody should cut down the consumption of meat, maybe for health reasons, I don't know. But the more critical thing is that it's kosher, there's a bracha, and know that we're not just eating here. Everything that we do, everything we encounter, there's spiritual energies in it, and it's waiting for us to elevate. The Baal Shem Tov taught, when a person is lost, he's driving, he was supposed to go here, and he ends up there. You think this is by accident? The Pasuk says, Hashem is hadigever kenono. Hashem directs the steps of man. I am here because where I am treading or driving or flying, whatever it is, that place is waiting for me to do a mitzvah there. Make a bracha, say a little bit of Tehillim, learn some Torah, and elevate the sparks in that place, wherever it is. Wherever it is. This is mind-boggling to consider. Hashem directs out wherever we are, whatever we own, wherever we've been. It's all because that object I needed to own because I have to elevate it. That business, this thing, gets down to minutiae. And if I didn't, again, there's teshuvah. The moment I turn to Hashem, I elevate my whole past. So we need to work on this with a sense of privilege and responsibility. Every moment we're engaged in either we're elevating or degrading. There's no neutral. We're constantly doing something to God's world. Making it purposeful or pulling it down. And if he did, again, there's teshuvah. Again, why wait? So this grants a tremendous responsibility, but at the same time, self-esteem. That the girl that said to me, what difference does it make? I'll die tomorrow. No, your life makes all the difference. Hashem needs your mitzvah. Everything you go and everything you own is meant to be so that you should use it in the service of Hashem. And it's easy. The mitzvahs guide us in every moment. And you are critical to Hashem's purpose. What you contribute to his whole desire, nobody else can do. We're all everything. These are most empowering. Okay, friends, have a wonderful Shabbos.